We all love a good fantasy adventure, something to take yourself out of reality for a bit and become fully immersed in a fantastical world with an amazing story, legendary powers, and clever puzzles. Action-adventure video games have persisted since the earliest days of gaming. Many games try to achieve something like this, whether they be sprawling AAA ventures or unique indie projects. One of the latest offerings we're covering today is Kaku, the Ancient Seal, an indie action-adventure game with role-playing elements. This game promises an amazing journey set on a sprawling continent with unique powers and a lot of freedom. This is a big task for a small dev. So, does Kaku take you to this fantasy realm, or is it just a pile of caca? Well, welcome back to I Dream of Indie Games, and we're gonna find out in our full review. But before we get started, if you enjoy our content, please consider liking and subscribing, and supporting us on Patreon. Also, be sure to tune into our Thursday live streams, which now air on both Twitch and YouTube. Your indie gaming community is waiting for you. So, Kaku the Ancient Seal starts off in a sort of cold open. The titular character, Kaku, is running after a flying pig creature that flies with its ears. After being ambushed by a boar-like creature, Kaku falls through some ice and into an ice cave and proceeds to land on a man named Geyser. After you injure him, accuse him of eating the pig, and then proceed to save him from boars, you go on an adventure with Geyser to find this pig, and you end up at some ruins that tell the creation story of Saga and the 4 elementals. Kaku is then tasked with restoring the elemental temple. This turns out to be a sort of trial, and Kaku earns Saga's blessing and must restore the blank stele and also restore the 4 elemental souls from the elemental continents. Oh, and the pig, aptly named Piggy, shows up and starts asking about someone named Baggy who has turned to darkness. So apparently you're also now looking for this Baggy person. From there, you go to explore minor stories that interweave with the main story when you adventure in these various continents. The story has the main basic characteristics of a high fantasy, but it's not really unique. It's a pretty basic story, but it's also a pretty confusing one. The storytelling feels off. Character dialogue is poorly translated, which makes it hard to follow, but I don't think the story would be well organized even if the translation was better. From the cold open straight into a fantastical story where Kaku just accepts that he's some hero, I just don't buy that. That type of story structure always gets to me. I don't feel attached to the character yet, so I don't accept that he's a hero just yet. The writers needed a slower build for both the world and the character. The game is marketed as open world. Open world is pretty loose here. It isn't really an open world so much as open area, similar to what Outer Worlds did, but it's even more restricted than that in my opinion. You go to these different continents and play through a singular quest line. There are some side objectives, but mainly in the form of treasure or collectibles. The game funnels you to quests in a very linear fashion. There also aren't any story-based side quests. Now, this isn't a bad thing. Old school Zelda games operated much in this way. I just think using the open world tag is sort of just a buzzword here for marketing and doesn't really accurately portray how the game plays. As for the main gameplay, I describe it as baby's first Souls-like. As you defeat enemies, you gain these ancient stones which act as a currency to level up. Well, you don't really level up so much as you spend them on abilities. You also have these runes you activate to use as checkpoints. However, when you activate these checkpoints, enemies don't respawn, and when you die, you don't have to go and collect the currency. Along the way, you get other stone types to level up things like the food that you can cook or the slingshot ammunition that you can craft. You also find ruin keys along the way in the levels. These ruin keys can be used at the Ruins Realm. The Ruins Realm is where you do leveling and unlock the ruins, which are short puzzle-based temple trials that give you health and stamina upgrades at the end. You teleport to the ruins realm through an ability that Piggy has. Yes, these ruins do try to emulate Breath of the Wild's shrines, but in my opinion, the ones in Kaku are much easier and much less clever in design. Combat is essentially hack and slash, but you can also use projectiles with that slingshot. You have freedom to equip various armor pieces as well as socket gems for stat bonuses. The combat portion reminds me a bit of Kingdoms of Amalur, right down to having an alternate form you can take by using Saga's power, which basically makes Kaku super OP, similar to the Reckoning mode in Amalur. However, combat overall can feel pretty clunky. There is a dodge roll, but there's no iframe, so you can still get hit even when you're dodging. There is a parry, but it never seems to actually parry anything. There is no direct block. Locking onto a target somehow makes the camera even worse when you're in combat. Some enemy attacks also don't line up with the attack animation properly, which makes dodging even more confusing. As you gain more abilities, you'll have to use button combinations to trigger them, but no, they're not inputted as combinations that build off of singular actions. Instead, they act as separate button inputs to activate the ability, which just feels really weird. The worst thing about combat though is that it's just not fun. Most enemies are stun locked when you hit them, so you can spam attacks and easily end them there. There's also a poise meter that you can break to stun enemies, but when most enemies get stun locked from standard attacks, why would you really need to do this? Besides, poise isn't really fun or tactical to break like in other RPGs. You're basically just using an alternate heavy attack to reduce a poise bar. Heavy attacks eat away at your stamina as well. Even when you level up your stamina, it feels like heavy attacks always take a quarter to half of your stamina at all times. So this makes stamina management less forgiving than even a From Software game. You'll also be doing crafting of food items and ammunition. The ammunition does come in handy. You have various types of ammunition, from poison ammo to shock ammo to fire ammo, which does come in handy actually. But food is a little weird. Food does help restore a good amount of health or stamina or give bonuses, but there is a significant cooldown to use food. In combat, this isn't helpful. You can't reliably heal whenever you want. And in one-on-one boss fights that often play more like Dark Souls than a standard action hack and slash, it just doesn't feel right to me. You'll be finding side camps around the levels as well, and these side camps have loot. You'll also be finding towers with slide puzzles that you can solve and use as fast travel points. I never needed to use these fast travel points. Like I said, the game funnels you where you need to go. As for these slide puzzles, they're also just not really fun either. They also have bad controls. You have to press a button to select a piece to move, but also press that same button to deselect it, and this doesn't always activate properly, or sometimes the button presses register twice, and then I'll fail the puzzle by moving a piece too many times and run out of movements. In general, the controls can be pretty wonky. The main action button is also used for running, so you'll often be randomly selecting things in the world that you didn't mean to, because the game thinks you're using the action button when you actually mean to run. The game is also very copy and paste. The mission structures are often go here, get this thing, and come back. If you try to stray from the path, you likely won't be discovering anything either. The game wants you to go where it directs you, and the world around it is just mostly filler. In addition, you'll be fighting the same enemies over and over again, so it all becomes pretty bland. Overall, the game looks okay-ish. I think the Unreal Engine is doing some heavy lifting here with the use of lighting and particle effects, because the actual designs of characters and environments are pretty mid. In fact, some characters such as Geyser just straight up look bad. Enemies are also pretty generic, from uninspiring tribal characters which look indistinguishable from the main cast to basic boars or little birds. And you'll be coming across the same enemies often, so get used to having these encounters start to feel soulless. Audio is also not great. The game utilizes a sort of made-up language, and this would be fine if the language didn't sound so random and annoying. It kind of sounds like the voice actors are just randomly saying variations of kak, kik, ku, ka. Often, the audio doesn't line up with the lip syncing either, which breaks immersion. The background music sounds royalty free, which again would be fine, but it's the same song looping over and over and over. The piggy character, which sort of acts as Navi from Ocarina of Time, is also annoying. Now, towards the end of my time with the game, I started experiencing some significant issues. I came across some crash errors. Luckily, the game autosaves frequently, so I didn't really lose any progress, but really, crashes like this shouldn't be common in a full release game. I also experienced a bug where the currency you collect from enemies wasn't adding up. Instead, whenever I defeat an enemy, the currency that I collected would replace what I collected before. When I did get to a point where I killed an enemy that gave me enough to purchase an upgrade, I went to the Ruins realm and the count was totally off, which signals to me that the game just stopped counting currency properly at all. Lastly, I came across a main boss that had 4 health bars. After I got through the first health bar, the boss stopped taking damage no matter how much damage I dealt to it. So essentially, I'm soft locked now. So where does that leave us? Well, Kaku the Ancient Seal is a valiant effort for a small studio to develop a large action-adventure game, but there are just too many issues. The story is boring and poorly told, the gameplay feels clunky and bland, sound and graphics are very generic and repetitive, and there seems to be significant bugs that can softlock you. I don't think there was any point in my playthrough when I had fun, and actually I started to get angry at the game when I started experiencing these bugs. So for all of this, I have to give Kaku the Ancient Seal the Indie Krampus.
Shit.